Well, it's not quite a feeding frenzy out there, but that doesn't mean nothing's biting. The best deals are the quiet ones, and you just have to know where to look. Buyers are circling, sellers are holding, and most people are still waiting for someone else to make that first move. But if you know how to read this kind of a market, the signals, the silence, the slow play, you can make some very smart moves right now. And this month's numbers don't just show what's happening, they show who's actually making those moves and who's just waiting. In this update, we're going to break down what's actually happening in June across the Fraser Valley and how it showed up right now and right here in Mission. We'll look at sales activity, benchmark prices, and what's moving in each price range, and what kind of strategy is actually working in today's market. I'm Irene, your local realtor right here in my community of Mission, BC, and I've been helping people just like you make smart real estate decisions for nearly 20 years. I've seen what works, and I've seen what doesn't. If you're thinking of selling and want a real plan built for this market, all my contact information is in the description box below. Now, let's take a look at what the June numbers are actually showing across the Fraser Valley. Across the Fraser Valley, June sales were almost flat, just 1% higher than in May. They were also 9% below this time last year and sitting 33% under the 10-year average. The sales to active listing ratio stayed at 11%, keeping us firmly in a buyer's market territory. Active listings are now close to 11,000. Up slightly from May and 30% higher than they were a year ago. But even with more homes available, new listings actually dropped 10% last month. And that's not surprising. We're in the summer months and a lot of sellers tend to hit the pause, especially if they didn't see the results they wanted in the spring. Prices moved down across all property types. Detached homes dropped 1.6% from May and are down 4.6% year over year. Townhomes dipped 1%, down 3.1% from last year. Apartments fell 1.2%, down 4.5% year over year. Of the properties that did sell, apartments are averaging 39 days on the market, detached homes are at 35, and townhomes are now at 30 days. There is no rush out there. No panic either, just a kind of mindful calm that gets everyone thinking carefully about what they actually want. Even though every seller knows it's a buyer's market, not every seller is motivated, and their level of urgency, well, it's not something you're going to find in a section of the listing brochure. You've got to read between the lines, watch how they price, watch how they respond, and definitely watch how they negotiate. And it's not just happening here. This kind of buyer hesitation is showing up across the entire Fraser Valley and the Greater Vancouver area. Affordability pressure is still very real with no end in sight. Yes, I know prices have softened, but with inflation consistently rising, stagnant wages, and higher carrying costs, buyers are doing the math very carefully. The Bank of Canada's key interest rate currently sits at 2.75%, and the next rate announcement is scheduled for July 30th. While many hoped for another reduction, most experts, including myself, are not expecting it. Why? Because inflation is still running above the bank's 2% target, especially in areas like food, services, and shelter costs. And at the same time, the labor market hasn't weakened enough. Unemployment has risen slightly, but wage growth is still strong. From the bank's perspective, cutting rates right now could risk reigniting inflation before it's fully under control. They need clear evidence of a sustained slowdown before making that move. Basically, it means we're all not hurting quite enough just yet. Right now, confidence is flat. People are cautious, not panicked, but still weighing every move against the headlines of global slowdowns, recession risk, and a government that hasn't made any significant housing policy adjustments in months. So what we're seeing is a slower market, not because the demand has disappeared, but because decision making is more strategic than ever. And with that in mind, let's take a closer look at what actually sold here in Mission and how that compares to what's currently sitting on the market. Now in June, we saw 47 total sales across all property types, detached homes, townhomes, and apartments. That's a slight drop from May, which had 50 sales, but just above the 45 sales we saw this time last year. And here's how those 45 sales break down by price. 11 sold under 700,000, 15 between 700 and 1 million, 14 between 1 million and 1.3 million, 2 between 1.3 and 1.5 million, 4 between 1.5 and 2 million, and over 2 million Mission saw 0 sales. So while sales are still happening in Mission, it's mostly concentrated in the entry-level and mid-range price brackets. Much less movement at the higher end this month. Out of 431 total listings in June, only 47 sold. That's just 10.9%. The remaining 384 listings, a full 89.1%, are still sitting on the market. And that gives us a sales to listing ratio of 12.2% here in Mission, or about 8.2 months of inventory. That's firmly buyer's market territory, and while homes are selling, sellers need to be realistic and consider their pricing strategy objectively if they're serious about getting results. Now let's take a detailed look at detached homes. Now, while sales were up 6.4% across the Fraser Valley, here in Mission, they actually came down. And the sellers that are getting those deals, well, they're the ones who blinked first. The ones who understand that testing the market right now usually just means testing the buyer's patience. You're in a competitive market. If your listing's not well presented and well priced, it will probably just sit there, making friends with all the other stale listings. Detached homes in Mission had a benchmark price of $1,026,700 in June. That's up 0.7% in May and down 2.8% compared to last year. We saw 37 detached home sales in June, down 11.9% from May, but still up 15.6% compared to last year. Inventory held steady at 291 active listings, and that's a small increase of 2.5% from last month, but over 31.7% higher than June 2024. And that's giving us 7.9 months worth of inventory and technically still in a buyer's market. Let's break it down and take a look what actually sold in Mission across the detached market, starting from the lower end and working our way up. Under 700, we were at 3 sales, all mobile homes under 550,000, each sold below asking price. Between 700 and 1 million, Mission saw 15 sales, mostly older entry-level homes, ranchers, split levels, and compact 2 stories with some suites. 2 sold over asking price, receiving multiple offers, thanks to sharp pricing. The rest sold below list price, some by more than $150,000. It's a clear reminder that pricing right from the start is going to make the difference in this market. 1 million to 1.3 million, 14 homes sold in this range, making it the most attractive segment. These were mostly under 25 years old, well renovated, over 2,500 square feet, and in established neighborhoods. All sold below asking, but one standout with a strong list price and clear presentation drew multiple offers. Between 1.3 and 1.5, only 2 sales here, both small acreages with older homes, both sold for less, which lines up with what we're seeing in this price range. Buyers will wait unless the value is dead obvious. Between 1.5 and 2, Mission saw 4 sales. These are larger homes on small acreages, over 3,200 square feet, and just outside the city core. But pricing still mattered. One sold for $500,000 below asking, and another $250,000 under, and a third down by $150,000. These are big numbers, and they show just how far many list prices are from reality. Moving on to townhomes, the benchmark price for a Mission townhome came in at $659,600, and that's down 2.4% from May and down 2.3% year over year. There were 5 townhome sales last month, up 66% in May, but still down by 16.7% compared to June of last year. We had 44 active listings on the market, which is down 21.4% from May, but still up 22.2% from last year, reflecting the seasonal listing pattern that we typically see here in Mission. Altogether, that gives us about 7.3 months of inventory and technically a balanced market. The townhouse market here in Mission is struggling. It's struggling. Most buyers in this price range are comparison shopping with Abbotsford, but they see a wider selection of newer, more convenient developments. That extra competition continues to put pressure on Mission's resale townhome market. Now let's take a closer look at what actually sold. And here were the 5 townhome sales in Mission last month, ranging from just under $450,000 to just under $900,000. The lowest was a modest unit under $500,000. The highest, a newer, more spacious townhome, just over 2,000 square feet and in a very popular complex. Most sold with modest price reductions. Nothing dramatic here, but buyers are clearly cautious and still very selective. Well-presented, well-priced homes are still moving, even in this slower price range. And finally, let's talk about apartments. Sales ticked up slightly in June and inventory came down a bit. But let's not confuse that with a full-blown rebound. Most buyers are still sitting back waiting for the right unit at the right price. Unless it has everything that they need and is priced in their budget, it's not going to move. There's a lot of maybe later energy in this segment. And sellers who overreach are learning the hard way. Now, in terms of the numbers, the benchmark price for a Mission apartment in June came in at $453,200. That's no change from May and down just 0.7% compared to June of last year. We had 5 sales last month, unchanged from May, but up 28.6% year over year. There were 49 active listings, down 7.5% from May, but up 44.1% from this time last year. And that puts this segment at 5.4 months of inventory, leaning just slightly towards a balanced market. So what actually sold? The 5 sales that we had ranged in price and age, some newer units, some over 25 years, 1 and 2 bedroom units for all 5. All 5 of them accepted less than asking price. And on average, the final sale prices were about $20,000 to $35,000 below the original list price, showing that even in this area, buyers are still pushing back if those numbers don't make sense. So what's shaping all of this beyond just the local numbers? Well, affordability remains the biggest challenge. Even with prices softening, the combination of elevated living costs, stronger wage demands, and reduced borrowing power is keeping many buyers on the sidelines. Public sentiment, well, still very cautious. People know this isn't 2022 anymore, but they're just not convinced that it's the bottom of the market either. They're hearing mixed signals, rising inventory, sliding prices, global instability, and unfortunately, the federal government has not stepped in with much of an impact. Layer on persistent inflation, lingering recession concerns, and broader economic uncertainty, and you get a market that's hesitant. It all shows up in the data. Homes are still selling, but only when the price, presentation, and timing all line up. Buyers are still out there, but they're not chasing. They're scanning, they're waiting, and they are being selective. And if your listing isn't getting any bites, it might not be the pond. It just might be your bait. Homes that are priced strategically, presented thoughtfully, and aligned with what buyers actually want, well, they're likely to nibble at your hook. The rest still floating, overpriced, and overlooked. Thanks for watching the July market update for Mission BC. And if you're wondering whether your bait's doing its job, you know where to find me. I'm Irene, and I'm local and loving it.